And thanks for staying with us. In our first story, government is here to settle public sector workers' contribution to the Social Security and National Insurance Trust SSNIT, amounting to 4.33 billion cedis. That's according to the 2021 Auditor General's report. Here's more.
With the Controller and Accountant General's Department and the Ministry of Finance on the payments plan for defraying the outstanding debt. It therefore wants management to explain that SSNIT already has a payment plan with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that the outstanding debt has so far made some efforts to settle the indebtedness, citing the year 2020, in which 2 bonds totaling 1 billion cedis were received as part payment of the indebtedness. The report further noted that 10 out of 45 unlisted equity companies SSNIT invested in have not been paying dividend to the trust for the past 10 years. The total investment value of the 10 companies stood at 150.3 million cedis. The report therefore recommended that management should assess the operations of the companies to ascertain the reasons behind the poor performance and take strategic decisions that will safeguard the interest of the trust.
Joining us on Zoom is Executive Director of the Policy Initiative for Economic Development, Dr. Daniel Amartey-Anim. There's a lot to dig in on the Auditor General's report, but first, your reaction to our lead story today, which is that government is here to settle public sector workers' contributions to SSNIT, amounting to 4.33 billion cedis.
Yes, it's quite unfortunate because the SSNIT contribution, to my mind, is very critical and key, because that is what employees will rely on when they retire. But it is a clear indication that government is indeed broke, and the situation as presented to us is even more deeper than as we see. Because as it stands now, if government is unable to settle SSNIT payment of public sector workers, then clearly that is to tell you that the economic situation as we find ourselves now is nothing to write home about. It is quite unfortunate, and I trust that the Ministry of Finance will expedite action to be able to augment the payment, because that is very key. It's a payment that ought to be invested for the benefit of workers when they retire, so they could, they could use it to during their retirement age. So to me, I think it is not an issue that should be taken lightly. It is not an issue that should, be written under the carpet. It should be taken seriously, and government ought to expedite action as quickly as possible to effect the payment as and when the funds are made necessary. Not even as and when. Government should facilitate the process to ensure that the payments are effected. And to me, I think that's the only way out for government to do, because it is very important, it's very critical, and it is very key to the survival of employees as and when they retire. That is what they're going to rely on, and government ought to take it as a very important exercise.
Yeah, and some of the headlines from the Auditor General's report are depressing, including the fact that total irregularities in the public sector organizations.
Hello,
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Please come again.
Yes, I was just making a point about some of the headlines we have read from the Auditor General's report being so depressing. And the top headline, the fact that total irregularities in the public sector organizations in 2021 increased 36% to 17.48 billion cedis. I just wanted you to paint a picture for us, to our audience, on how these losses are hurting the economy, which is already in a crisis.
Yes, it is just a manifestation of the kind of system we're running over the period, where we focus more on post-audit without focusing on pre-audit. Pre-audit is putting mechanisms to ensure, that is internal control mechanisms to ensure that the system works and the system becomes more effective to minimize some of these irregularities and to some larger extent financial malfeasance in the public sector. So yes, it's hurting government, it's hurting the performance of the economy. If you have so much money that is unaccounted for, investment that have been locked up in unproductive investment mechanisms or schemes, and we are not accounting for it, and then some of this money ought to be used for the betterment of the citizens. So it is just a manifestation and a reflection of the kind of weak governance system we have, and that's the reason which it appears that things are not working as expected for us over the period. So what I will recommend is for us to move away from post-audit. The post-audit is what the Auditor General has done, which is very good, but we need to focus on pre-audit, putting in place internal control mechanisms, and I think he has recommended one. That is by ensuring that we have a corporate governance system in place, by ensuring that the appointing authorities appoint people, not just appointed people, but appointing competent hands that will ensure the efficient and productive management of public sector institutions. So to me, we need to revisit our governance system. We need to visit our corporate governance system. We need to visit the overall public administration of this country by ensuring that we do things that will benefit the system, that will benefit the overall welfare of the citizens. As it stands now, I'm afraid the system is gradually losing its core, and it could be described as, so to speak, in code, as a failed system. And this is not just only peculiar to this particular administration, but I have seen it as a very endemic systemic failure that we have over the period. And we need to revisit the system. We need to realign and ensure that we put in mechanisms to ensure that some of these irregularities and financial malfeasance should become the thing of the past. If we want a very efficient governance system, if we want a better country for all of us.
And while some of these may be as a result of corruption, and as you point out, some of the cases have to do with efficiencies in managing public finances, and you talk about the Auditor General asking for more compliance. It looks like that is not enough. How can we ensure efficiency?
Yes, number one, by ensuring that we appoint the right people. We have to minimize appointment of political faithfuls. That's the first step. And then secondly, we must ensure that we apply the law to the latter. So for instance, if an institution fails to comply to lay down systems and rules, and as a result, irregularities emerge, then there's a need for sanctions to be applied. I'm of the view, respectfully, that if sanctions are applied, people will take governance and public institutions seriously, and they will do things that will ensure that they strictly comply with rules and systems as put in place by the Constitution or any other law currently in existence. So it is about compliance, it is about it's about applying the whip as and when people flout regulations and systems. So to me, if we, as a serious nation, these are some of the things that ought to be done to ensure that we have a very efficient system running for the benefit of all citizens.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Amartey, who is Executive Director of the Policy Initiative for Economic Development. Appreciate your time with us. Now.